What's your favorite museum in DC?
Easy. I am a museum of natural history enjoyer, partly because it was my favorite growing up. My mom would always take me there to try to entertain me, and I would go under the termite hill in the bug exhibit, and I would just sit there for hours, making no friends and probably kind of weirding other kids out.
Not even friends with the termites.
I tried.
Monica, which museum did you commune with most?
So when I first moved to DC nearly 20 years ago, I had this idea that I was going to spend my lunch hours going to the Smithsonian's, and I would go back again and again to the archives. And this is going to sound really hokey, but as a 21-year-old, realizing that you could go in and look at the Constitution and be within feet of these documents, I found it and still find it really moving. It feels like a really patriotic and emotional experience for me. So I'm going archives.
That's actually a meaningful answer, whereas I'm like, I like bugs.
Well, I also like Nicolas Cage, so the National Treasure connection probably informs that.
This is Impromptu from Washington Post Opinions, a show that brings you conversations about the news we can't stop thinking about. I'm Molly Roberts, a columnist at The Post.
And I'm Drew Goins, author of the Today's Opinions newsletter. This week, we're talking about the Smithsonian. Last week, this American institution became the latest target of the Trump administration's effort to remove educational materials and art that suggests that America has a racist past, and to ban recognition of people based on their identities.
Apparently, the culture wars are raging so wild these days that even our national museums can't stay out of the fray. But what do these institutions and others like them mean to us and to the many millions of people who visit them every year? And what happens when the art and the narratives that places like the Smithsonian expose us to are influenced or even censored by our president's politics?
Today, we are joined once again by our colleague Monica Hesse to talk through all of this. Hi, Monica, and welcome back to Impromptu.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so a bit of background for those who didn't spend as many hours in the termite hill as children. The Smithsonian Institution includes 21 museums, dozens of libraries and research centers, and the National Zoo. It's been around for over 175 years. It's mostly federally funded. And guess how much it costs to visit one of the DC-based spots? Nothing at all.
Whoa!
This free admission policy attracts throngs of visitors from all over America and the world, which is nice if kind of crowded sometimes. So for me, growing up in D.C., as the White House and Congress ping-ponged from party to party, I always felt like the Smithsonian existed outside or above politics. What do you guys think about President Trump dictating what should or shouldn't be in these museums?
I can already tell this is going to be a really emotional conversation to me because the Smithsonians have... The slang term for them is America's attic. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that you can go to them and you can experience the vastness of what it means to be an American at any point in history, at any time of day, in any walk of life. They are national treasures and they're treasures of humanity. And the people who run them do so with such passion and such education and such deliberateness. And the idea that we would go in and try to rewrite history to make ourselves feel better about our more lackluster parts of it is depressing, to say the least. They are one of the most magnificent institutions we have in this country.
I am similarly depressed by everything that has transpired so far, but I'm also not particularly surprised. I find it eminently understandable, right? It's kind of remarkable that the Smithsonian Institution has, for the most part, to me, stayed outside the fray of politics because they are this extremely powerful, extremely beloved way to tell America's story, right? That's controlled by the government. And what is more political than that, ultimately? I was hunting for past controversies with the Smithsonian, and there truly are not that many that I found, but the one that kept coming up over and over again was in 1994 when there was going to be an exhibit about the Enola Gay, which dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, and there had been this planned, this pretty comprehensive, here was the horrible toll on Japan, here, are all of the survivors, generations past, and all of the cancer, all of the human toll, and there was a huge outcry that this this tarnished America's reputation, that it was too sympathetic to the victims of the A-bomb, and it was like largely scrapped, right? And that's because politicians know how many people come to the Smithsonian. They know how powerful it is to tell a story from the perspective of America, right? We are the ones telling this story about ourselves, and we're gonna control that. So I get it. To me, it's always been a point of pride that we as a country are able to introspect and reveal the like warts and all nature of the country. But I very much get what Trump is doing.
Yeah, now we're anti-Enola Gay for other reasons, I think, right?
That's true. Monica has a great column about that.
Don't say
well.
Enola Gay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's sort of corny, but it's always been meaningful to me nonetheless. The idea that the good, the bad, the ugly, it's our shared heritage. So you come to DC and you take it in for free, and then you return to wherever you visited from, and you kind of put something back out into the world from there, or into the country from there. It's a public resource, like the education system, which has also become a casualty in the culture wars. I think what you guys were getting at is, as Monica said, the vastness. Like if you're writing a textbook or crafting a curriculum, you're generally going to have a narrative in there that you're kind of picking. But what's so nice about this is that there's a set narrative, because there is so much there. You can go to the mall, you can visit the African American History Museum or not. You can just stick to air and space. Same with the Museum of the American Indian. And then what you leave with really depends on you. There doesn't have to be picking and choosing. It's Trump who's now saying we have to pick and choose.
Yeah, it's the Smithsonian Institution as a whole does not really push a narrative of America, right? Like it is so vast that it puts out all of the raw material, and you just pick out the narrative from that you see emerging. But that's not something that Trump has ever really been comfortable with. Like Trump is a very brand-focused, on-message guy. You know, in his own life, it's gold, it's money, it's luxury, right? So this order portrays that there needs to be one singular narrative about the United States, and that it has to be untarnished. How is this philosophy at odds with the whole point of museums generally and the artwork and object inside of them?
I mean, I think that what museums do is they contextualize. And that's why when we had all of those debates over whether to remove Confederate statues, a lot of historians were saying, if you truly feel that this is part of your heritage and that this is history and we can't rewrite history, then take them down from public squares and put them into museums where their purpose can be discussed in a reasoned and thoughtful way. You know, a monument in a park is set there to be admired, is set there to be applauded, but a monument in a museum is set there to be examined and learned from. And so, you know, I spent a while in the National Portrait Gallery and the Museum of American Art this week for a column that I wrote about Trump's efforts to redo some exhibits in that museum. And what's truly amazing is how you walk through and you get a sense of a real diversity of experiences. Just as Molly was saying, you don't walk through it thinking that America was bad. You don't walk through it thinking America was an evil place. You walk through it feeling a tremendous amount of sympathy and empathy for all of the people who lived in it, but they don't shy away from showing you the parts where we've messed up. They don't shy away from showing you what history felt like to the people who were on the bottom side of it rather than the victors.
I also think that art that all points in the same direction, just from a consumer perspective, gets so boring, right? What I kept thinking of as I was reflecting on this order is there's this situation in the sitcom 30 Rock where, you know, Liz Lemon, played by Tina Fey, like kind of absconds with some of the very conservative Jack's money, and she's using it to push the boundaries of what art is. And he's kind of watching this press conference she's giving, and he goes, "We know what art is. It's paintings of horses." And like it feels like that's kind of where Trump is wanting to take things. I look at the museum situation in Russia right now, and I was researching it a little bit, and the state Russian museum has started appropriating Ukrainian artifacts and saying that these things are Russian. These, you know, Ukrainian phenomena are actually Russian phenomena. They're exhibitions that support the invasion. In November, the Gulag Museum in Russia was shut down for fire violations. Yeah, okay. It has since opened up.
Sounds real.
A new director. And Russia today is the sort of country where, you know, the narrative that is told by museums gets like whacked into line. And it is awful to think of America facing that same fate.
But I think that what's remarkable about that, and in watching this happen in real time, both in Russia and sort of in real time in the United States, is just the profound realization that history can be shaped to look however you want it. That if you remove enough paintings depicting racism, or if you see what we saw happen at the Department of Defense and across the governmental internet a few months ago, where the administration was scrubbing any reference to homosexuality or scrubbing any reference to Women's History Month or Hispanic History Month, you can really make history look a certain way. But that doesn't mean that's actually what happens. You're sort of papering over things, but you can't transform what actually happened.
Right. No, I completely agree with that. I mean, it is the fascist states that have had official histories, and we're not supposed to be doing that. Now Trump is.
Monica, I really am interested in that idea that you shared of, there's no way to erase what ultimately happened, no matter how we try to present it. We're going to talk more about that, but we'll do it after the break. Please don't go away.
Welcome back. I'm Molly Roberts, and this is Impromptu. So, Trump has also mandated, in this most recent executive order, but also he mentioned it in a memorandum on Inauguration Day, that all federal buildings need to have traditional, classical architecture. Back in February, he wrested control of the Kennedy Center, a performing arts institution here in D.C., going so far as to appoint himself chair of the venue. What does it say about him, or about this moment more broadly, that the president is bent on taking over so much of the city's arts and culture?
I mean, I think it really speaks to how important arts and culture are, that this is a medium that reaches an extremely large portion of the population, and it's a digestible medium. Mm-hmm. You might not want to sit down and read a policy paper, but you'll go to a movie and be moved. You'll go to an art gallery and think. You'll listen to a piece of music and walk away a different person than you were when you walked in. So I remember talking to a few people who thought, like, the Kennedy Center is the least of our problems because meanwhile, he's firing all of these federal workers. And I agree, but I think the Kennedy Center is the most of our problems because the art we create gets to the core of who we are and how we're going to define ourselves as a country.
I think it's also, Monica, not just digestible to the people that Trump is trying to reach, but also digestible to Trump himself, which this is something that he's kind of stumbled upon in his second term. The first term, he was surrounded by so many adults in the room, quote unquote, that pushed him into governance stuff and policy stuff and the stuff that, mattered in terms of, being the president. And he was just so bored to tears with that, you could tell. And this is something that Trump, like most of us, can just tangibly grasp because it's the fabric of our everyday life. Art, culture is so ubiquitous. Trump is making changes that he can actually see out there in the world.
Yeah, I mean, this guy has never been super ideological. He hasn't ever really believed in anything much except himself and himself as a performer, as a public figure, as an object of attention. And I think that's the other baser level on which all this is happening, the level of entertainment and attention. He's the show business president. We know that. We used to call it the Trump show back in the first term. Now I guess we don't even like to make that much light of it because it's gotten so tragic. But he literally said after he spurned Zelensky in that meeting, this will be great TV. He wants the spectacle more than anything. When he took over the Kennedy Center, there's this photo of him on the balcony extending his arms as if he's presiding over one big performance. And I think he kind of is. I mean, I guess the Village people are going to be playing the Kennedy Center now. There's no more opera. I mean, it really is the ethos of America is going to become the ethos of Trump.
One overlooked part of the Smithsonian order is that Trump requested that memorials and monuments that were removed or changed over the last 5 years potentially be restored. So so many of Trump's executive actions so far, it's a repudiation of the changes that we've made as a country since 2020 and the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, the racial reckoning that ensued. But more than just reverting to 2020, it feels like Trump is taking America, or trying to, much farther back. And the question is, can he do that through executive order? These are symbols, right? How much does the symbol matter compared to the sentiment, the beliefs, the history that underlie them?
I think that the real and potent aspect of art is that it makes you feel. And I think that all of these executive orders boil down to Trump trying to evoke certain emotions in certain groups of people. And more particularly, these orders seem to want to make white heterosexual Americans feel okay about themselves. They want to make white men feel like they're good men who got where they got because they deserved it and their ancestors deserved it and they've worked really hard. And they want people to feel like America has always been a just and fair place. And so if you have more than somebody else, it must be because you deserved more than somebody else. And that's not to discount anybody's hard work or anybody's ancestry, but it's a really polluting viewpoint of America. It's a really corrosive viewpoint because it ends up breeding disdain instead of empathy. By removing these symbols or papering over things, it just creates a false narrative that is divisive and inaccurate in almost every way.
It's interesting that you use those words, both corrosive and divisive. Corrosive because I know comparisons to Adolf Hitler with Donald Trump are often both overdone and overblown.
Take us there.
But something that Hitler literally, historically did was try to get rid of quote-unquote corrosive art and degenerate art. And the word divisive that you just used, Monica, is in Trump's executive order. He says he wants to get rid of divisive art. And I think, both back to the point that Drew was making earlier, some good art is just maybe a beautiful painting of a horse, but some good art is provocative. It's designed to make you feel uncomfortable, even upset. There's a very upsetting horse in Picasso's Guernica, right? And of course, history is going to be divisive too, because no country that's been around as long as ours, and we're a young country, won't have done things that were controversial at the time and straight up condemnable now or are controversial even now. But there's a strong case to be made that it's through things that are divisive on the micro level and grappling with them and reckoning with our contradictions that we can foster understanding and connection on the macro level. It's short-sighted to think that what's divisive is a full accounting of our history.
Yeah, I've rarely been more moved at the Smithsonian, any of the museums, than going and looking at the actual Star-Spangled Banner, the flag that was flying over Fort McHenry, and just being like, oh my God, this country, the patriotism, the beauty of this place. And then hearing the Star-Spangled Banner by Francis Scott Key, who was a incredibly racist slave owner, right? And in that moment, you just hear this soaring melody and you're like, God, this place is so complex, right? And grappling with that is what makes it so strong. And I have the benefit of having grown up and wrestled with these complexities through my education, through museum visits, through everything. And I think Trump can do all he likes to paper over these symbols, and we will not forget that at first, right? But living memory ultimately has its limits, which is the whole point of these museums. I don't think Trump is particularly interested in what outlives him. I think he's a guy pretty much focused on what he gets to experience in his time on Earth.
He might just think the world ends when he ends. For all we know.
But my greatest worries about these changes that are happening to art and culture in the United States right now are the ramifications long after Donald Trump is no longer president.
Yeah, it took us hundreds of years to claw ourselves to this more nuanced understanding of American history that we have now. I think it took a lot of introspection and thought and museums and education and all of that. And it is terrifying to think that hard work that we've all done could be undone within a term or two of presidency.
This whole idea about, heterosexual white men being elevated once more, whoa, makes me think of the conversation I was having earlier in the week with one of our colleagues. We were talking and he said, Trump's one good idea from his first term was the Garden of American Heroes. Let Trump do the Garden of American Heroes. And
it'll satisfy him.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
We can just get rid of the tariffs and everything.
And I thought about it for a little bit and I was like, no, this is just as politicized as everything else. If you give Donald Trump his opportunity to fill a garden with statues of the people he thinks matter most in our heritage, I can guarantee you Dolores Huerta is not going to be one of those statues. I will let you two populate it. Who do you put in the Garden of American Heroes?
I'm going to put forth that I don't think we need a Garden of American Heroes.
I
just think we need a Garden of American Harriets. And you can have Harriet Tubman. You can have Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Mm-hmm.
You can have Harriet Wilson, who was an African-American novelist. You can have...
Harriet the Spy.
I was about to say Harriet the Spy.
You can have Harriet the Spy. So that's my push. Garden of American Harriets.
All right. Excellent. I think we all have some museum dates to make it to.
Meet you under the termite hill, buddy.
I'll catch you under the termite hill. Monica, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy museuming, everyone.
Happy museuming.
This episode was produced by Hadley Robinson and Regina DeHeer, edited by Demir Marusic, Chris Sellentrop, and Jasmine Green, and mixed by Emma Munger. Chiki Esteban designed our new art. And special thanks to Millie Mitra and Deirdre Byrne. Thank you for listening to Impromptu. Please send us your thoughts about the Smithsonian and anything else we discussed today, termites and all. Email impromptu@washpost.com. Thanks for laughing, Molly, and be sure to tune in Tuesday to hear Dana Milbank tackle the biggest political news of the moment. Talk to you next week.